Now we move on to South America. The Colombian Foreign Minister Rosa Yolinda Villavicencio has said that for Colombia, the motivation behind the questioning of Colombia's loyalty to the agreement and to bilateral operation remain inexplicable. The Colombian Trade Minister Diana Morales has announced that the imposition of new 30% tariffs on Ecuadorian products in response to the duties applied by Ecuador. Meanwhile, the Colombian Foreign Minister, Defense Minister, and Trade Minister have reacted. Let's listen into what they have shared.
Bien, es sorprendente porque todo el tema del narcotráfico en Ecuador se mueve más en la zona de la costa y no en nuestra frontera, porque tenemos un pie de fuerza controlando de más de 10.000 hombres de fuerza de seguridad, incautando y persiguiendo al crimen organizado. Por eso resulta mucho más sorprendente esa excusa.
Criminales. Si hay una nación que ha combatido con total vehemencia y que le ha costado muchísimo la lucha contra el narcotráfico es Colombia. Es absurdo mencionar que hace falta voluntad de parte de Colombia en la lucha contra el narcotráfico cuando las cifras demuestran todo lo contrario.
De AAA, y es la imposición también de manera recíproca del 30% a 23 productos ecuatorianos y sus subproductos. Esta medida ya está publicada para comentarios y una vez.
Now for this discussion, we welcome Ms. Mitali Nikore. She's an economist, joins us live from New Delhi. Thank you very much, Ms. Nikore, for joining us. Good to see you. Now,
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Now looking at this, how could Colombia's decision to impose 30% tariffs affect their bilateral flows? As you know, we know that Colombia is of course not politically stable yet. And what economic risks does Colombia face if Ecuador responds with further trade measures?
No, absolutely. I mean, this is actually quite a surprising development because for many years we've seen that, Colombia has not gone ahead and imposed tariffs on pretty much, that many countries. Colombia has maintained, a rules-based trading order. And I think this entire move of imposing tariffs on Ecuador links with the larger set of global reactions that are taking place through the Trump tariffs. Once a country like the US goes and imposes tariffs on the whole world, it sort of pressurizes especially right-wing governments across the world to go ahead and use tariffs as a credible threat in the geopolitics for their countries. And I think this is exactly what we're seeing playing out in the Colombia-Ecuador crisis.
And what impact might these new tariffs have on prices for Colombian businesses, consumers in long term and short term?
So in the short term, I don't actually expect this to have a very big impact immediately going ahead, because it may be that some of the exporters actually adjust their prices, because the 30% tariff is not that high. 30% out of that, maybe, at least half of it can be absorbed by exporters and importers. So we may not see an immediate impact in the shorter term. It may also be that, the two sides actually decide to have a discussion and dialogue and come up with, a compromise on the tariff situation. But if Ecuador goes ahead and imposes retaliatory tariffs on Colombia, that's when this escalates and risks, getting into a trade financing crisis, and that is a situation that the global order should avoid, because again, it sets a precedent for other countries to also use tariffs and to also use retaliatory tariffs.
And now, how could this escalating trade tensions influence also investor sentiment, cross-border business activity, as we know that they are all very intertwined?
No, absolutely. I mean, see, at the end of the day, there are a lot of businesses which look at Colombia, Ecuador, and a group of countries in Latin America almost as a region and not as just separate countries. Because when we look at, institutional investors who are based in the US, who are amongst the largest investors in the region, they definitely look at these countries like as a bloc as opposed to just individual countries. So when two of these countries are not able to work together, it actually spooks investors, and investors may start to question whether this is a short-term knee-jerk reaction of an unstable government and will be sort of removed in the near term if the government changes, or if this is a signal of worsening relations between the two countries. And in this situation, the advice for the two countries would always be to work out their differences regardless of which disposition of the government is in power, because otherwise it creates an unstable region and spooks investors.
Yes. Building on that, Ms. Nikore, so is there any country that can play that part of diplomacy or mediation between these two countries?
So this is actually quite an interesting and loaded question in times like this, because the US is always standing as a global mediator and is always one of the first to take credit in situations like this. So, but in this situation, I do think the US can play a meaningful role. Because there are a lot of investors from the US who are involved in these two countries. So there is that option. Of course, there are the options of a number of Nordic countries who also have very deep trade ties with Colombia as well as with Ecuador. So there is always that option. But the ideal option always is for the two countries to come together and work out their differences without a third party.
Thank you for highlighting that and sharing that insight with us, Ms. Nikore.